seed oils are plaguing human health, and I'm here to put an end to that. I'm here to put the health back in humanity, to apprise you of the colossal nature of what could most aptly be characterized as a study that you never gave your active consent. And the fact that over the past century, the systematic substitution of the saturated and the monounsaturated fats that predominate in predominantly animal-derived sources with these so-called heart-healthy vegetable oils, which could most aptly be characterized as refined, bleached, and deodorized industrial seed oils that are extracted in factories that resemble oil refineries, that this substitution is effectively where we've gone awry and what has ultimately given rise to the preponderance, the plethora, at least 90% in my estimation, of diseases that are plaguing mankind. I've got a PowerPoint on screen that about a year ago, I can remember it was a Saturday morning on my way to work as a consultant pharmacist. I just got this hit of inspiration. I'm like, man, I need to tell my coworkers about this. And I had this on my keychain. It was clipped to my pant belt. And it was retractable, and I made a voice note. Save them. Save them, Jason. Tell them about your story. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this video today. For my former coworkers, for you, the person watching this, I'm here to help apprise you of the fact that these oils, their proliferation in processed packaged foods that line the aisles of your grocery store of choice, that we need to subtract these before they subtract us. I'm here to share the story of how I became aware of these oils and the fact that I had been contending with the consequences of their combustion. And I'm also here to tell you what to do about that, because there's hope. The human body is incredibly resilient. It's something that amazes me every single day when I think about the high quality health that I get to experience on a day-to-day basis. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful to have you here listening to my story. So here's the 10,000 foot overview. It's just the fact that in a lot of ways, my passion was born out of pain. And if I hadn't been given this unfair advantage about 9 years ago, having crossed paths with a man halfway around the world to me, living in Australia, that I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this story to tell, because it's not obvious to me that I would have independently elucidated the truth about seed oils. I needed someone to just take me by the hand and take me past the smoking wreckage, just show me the way. I had the will, but I didn't have the knowledge. I had the will to apply the information, but I didn't know which direction to go. And that's what I'm here to help you do, by letting you know that these industrial seed oils are in no way innocuous. It's not just the case that they're not heart healthy, it's that they are literally causing heart disease, the primary driver of not just heart disease, cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease. Having been a consultant pharmacist for 5 years and spending a good amount of time in a number of different nursing homes, and just seeing the end game and the fact that I didn't want to end up in one of those homes, cognitively compromised, demented. I don't want my parents to end up in one of those homes, my sister, my loved ones, you. I don't want you to end up in one of those homes. I want the world to get to see the best of you, not just today or tomorrow or the following Friday, but for decades down the road. So this slide here is just showing the fact that I'm just like you. I grew up on the standard American diet, the SAD diet that is rich in not just added sugars, not just food colorings, artificial sweeteners, preservatives, but something that never got a second look: seed oils. These highly rich in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, linoleic acid, which is highly inflammatory, oils that proliferate in all of these products. But you were never told about that in school. I was never told about that in my life. And yet this is the number one cause of chronic disease and the number one potential cause of you ending up in one of those homes with drool dribbling down your lip and chin. Literally drooling on yourself. Connect those dots. Seed oils to you not even having the wherewithal to know where you are, to be at ease with yourself, to go for a walk and just smile and laugh with your friends and family. What the fuck is wrong with this world? The amount of greed and corruption that has enabled the smokescreen that we can't see through to realize how toxic these oils are. And by the way, the truth about these oils is inevitable. It's got to come out in the wash eventually, but it's effectively the same as when cigarette smoking was defended, actively advocated for by doctors because the science said so. I love science, by the way, but it has to be good science. It can't be dirty science with a compromised signal to noise ratio. It cannot be epidemiologically derived. It has to be a hard mechanistic data set that is self-consistent and actually reconciles all of the observations made about that which it's describing. We'll talk about that in future slides, but this is just to say that my beginnings were no different than yours. The standard American diet is not something that I was inoculated from throughout my upbringing. I just wanted to share this very personal imagery here of from 2009 in July when I was diagnosed with eosinophilic esophagitis. And I was told that for life, I would have to be medicated with anti-inflammatory medications such as fluticasone propionate, that's Flovent. It's a type of inhaled corticosteroid. I was taking every day, sometimes twice a day, proton pump inhibitors, which, by the way, mitigate the acidity of your stomach, and they actually inhibit the absorption of not least cyanocobalamin, that's vitamin B12. In other words, your body is intelligent. You have an acidic stomach for a reason, and when I take these proton pump inhibitors or any other medications, we think that we've got like a sniper rifle. But these medications aren't sentient. They don't know the task with which they are destined, and they actually behave indiscriminately. And so the idea of there being side effects of a medication is actually a misnomer. There are merely effects, some that we pedestalize, some that we value, some that we like, and others that we don't like, that we kind of just like to sweep under the rug. But the truth is that medications don't just pull the one lever we want, they introduce entropy and create holes that then we try to peripherally patch downstream. But it's this game of whack-a-mole, and it's not a game that you're ever going to win. It's effectively rigged against you. This is what I learned about 9 years ago. And you can see some pretty profound ideas, right? Never outsource your own logic and intuition to other authorities. This is my friend and Australian savant who was living halfway around the world from me at the time, who really inspired me and really gave me a different lens to look through. I think I really, through osmosis and direct messaging with him, really assimilated a sound epistemological foundation from which to operate. He also turned me on to meditation, which ended up being the single greatest force multiplier in my entire life. And you can see here a couple of other very seemingly radical but black and white assertions about vegetable or seed oils causing not only heart disease, cancer, but also dementia. And the fact that the saturated fats that you've been told are going to clog your arteries and cause everything under the sun, that those are in fact the savior. So I found these ideas very intriguing as someone who's just always been open-minded myself and genuinely curious about what actually constitutes the truth. So why should we care? Heart disease, Every 33 seconds in the United States alone, somebody is dropping dead of it. You can see the staggering statistics here right now, but it's literally the number one cause of death and disability in men and women worldwide. This is the big rock. We gotta figure this out. What is causing myocardial infarctions? What is causing people to just drop dead of heart disease? Why is this happening? And just to get really personal, this was a few summers ago, and this was just a family gathering at my aunt's house. And it really hits home to me because the gentleman you see pictured in the back, and I'll just put my cursor around him. This is his son right here, who I'm standing alongside in this picture. And this is a man who, within 2 weeks of this family gathering, was found dead cold in his own home. What the fuck? What the fuck? In what world is that okay, man? You know, it's like his son, my cousin, now has to live the rest of his days without his dad by his side. He was actually on his way to initiate another semester in college. And his dad was going to fly with him, but he wasn't feeling well at the airport. So he goes home. The next morning is found by his neighbor dead cold. And what did he die of? He died of a heart attack. The question is, why is that happening? You know, because it's interesting, his wife Laura, who now has to proceed in his absence, is somebody who, at this family gathering, I was literally picking up bags of chips. And I was pointing out the safflower oil, the soybean oil, the vegetable oil, right? That's this non-specific colloquial term that constitutes a plethora of different refined, bleached, and deodorized oils: corn, canola, cottonseed, soybean, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, grapeseed, rapeseed, not the least of which. And I was telling her that paradoxically, these so-called heart-healthy oils are actually the number one cause of heart disease. And I told her that 2 weeks before her husband passed away. So this is very important information, and it's not something that anybody's probably ever told you before. So the bottom line here is that the prevailing paradigm is erroneous. So for decades of delusion, we've been told, I've been told, you have been told that LDL cholesterol is the bad kind of cholesterol and that we need to bottom that out at all costs. Just throw the kitchen sink at it. We've been told that because saturated fat raises LDL and these so-called heart-healthy vegetable oils lower it, that we should pedestalize the latter and demonize the former. But the big fat surprise is the fact that LDL is not actually injurious in its native form to the endothelium of the blood vessels in your body. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But first, I just wanted to illustrate a couple of different populations that eat sky-high saturated fat. So I want to be really clear is that my bias, if you will, is that I'm sort of assuming that if we arrive at truth, that it will be a self-consistent picture. And it is an assumption, by the way. I am assuming that I'm assuming that we're not being trolled by God, right? And in theory, we could be being trolled, where it's the case that we live in some sort of irrational realm, right? Where the laws of physics are ever changing and the cause of heart disease is not inherently stagnant, right? That is technically possible. But my best epistemic effort and assumption is that whatever the truth is, it would actually reconcile everything. The theory of everything, as it were. It would be something to which any observation we make in this realm wouldn't be surprising. And I can honestly say that I've arrived at an understanding to where I'm not surprised by the findings of any studies or any anecdotes in the real world. I'm not surprised because I have the proper paradigm, at least in my estimation. So far, it seems self-consistent. And for as long as it remains self-consistent, it will be something that I revere. And so on one side here, we have the Maasai who eat milk, meat, and blood. And we've got the Tokelauans who eat a lot of coconut oil. And what we find in both of these populations is bottomed out PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids. Neither of these populations consume seed oils. Neither of these populations consume more than 2% of their diet from linoleic acid, which is the parent omega-6 polyunsaturated fat that permeates these oils. And by extension, it permeates the processed packaged foods that, in a walking days of confusion, the people around you are just haphazardly procuring, consuming. And you have to wonder what the downstream of that is. Is it something like 2 weeks after a family gathering, someone very close to you dies of a heart attack? It's not obvious what those consequences are. And I would really ask you to meditate on that and ask you, what's your health worth to you? Today, tomorrow, and when you're 95 years old, what is that worth to you? So this here is just illustrating the French paradox. And the idea here that I want to present is that if we have something that arises as seemingly paradoxical, perhaps that is an indicator light suggesting that we've got the wrong paradigm. So maybe it's not a paradox, but rather, with respect to an erroneous paradigm, something that's only given rise to when our understanding is incomplete. And again, I'm being very honest here. This is an assumption that I'm making. I am assuming that if we arrived at the truth, that there would be no paradoxes. And I could be wrong about that. This is, just to be very clear, an assumption that agrees with my logic. And if it doesn't agree with yours, that's perfectly fine. Again, I'm just doing my best to understand something that I find disturbing. I find it disturbing that over 647 fucking thousand Americans alone are dying of heart disease every single year. And I want to know why. I want to know how I should be fueling myself, what I should be eating to not have to deal with that down the road. So in a nutshell, the French paradox is that we don't see an appreciable incidence of heart disease in a population that consumes a lot of full-fat dairy and other products that are high in saturated fats, which are purported to actually potentiate that which this population is not seeing. The Israeli paradox, showing on the other end of that spectrum a population that consumes very little saturated fat, that which is said to potentiate the proliferation of cardiovascular disease, and yet in this population, we see that they have a high incidence. So the question is, why is that the case? This population is consuming a lot of soybean, corn, and safflower oil. The question is, could that be potentially implicated? And so this is what I want to submit, is that perhaps heart disease is not caused by the boogeyman that LDL cholesterol has been made out to be. Maybe that LDL cholesterol could more aptly be likened to the homeowner that is at the scene of the crime when their house burns down. But the homeowner, the native LDL cholesterol, wouldn't actually burn down that where it lives. It wouldn't actually injure the endothelium and give rise to the chronic inflammatory process that is downstream. Both my paradigm and that which prevails in the form of the lipid heart hypothesis, I believe, would both agree that HDL could be likened to the fireman that is actually inversely correlated with heart disease. But where my paradigm differs is that it asserts that the true arsonist is not the homeowner, not the native LDL, but rather an oxidized form of LDL. That is the true arsonist that is actually setting off the chronic inflammatory response that is laying down the plaque. It's the oxidative stress. It's oxidized lipoproteins, not native ones. Here are some of the other consequences of oxidation throughout the body: in the eyes, the brain, the heart, joints, kidney, blood vessels, just showing the systematic consequences that must be contended with in the context of excess oxidation. And there was a paper in 2011 titled Chronic Disease. Are we missing something? This is James Oshman who had written this paper, and there's an incredibly profound quote therein that I'd like to read for you verbatim. And it is my strong opinion that everyone in healthcare, every pharmacist, every doctor, every phlebotomist, every CNA and nurse, so on and so forth, should meditate on this for at least a month. And I quote, "With respect to chronic disease, a plausible, testable, and refutable hypothesis is that all chronic diseases have a single underlying cause: the stresses that produce and maintain chronic inflammation. A corollary to the hypothesis is that the thousands of so-called diseases that have been named may actually be an elaborate classification system of the various symptoms that can arise from a single underlying condition: inflammation." Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. The ramifications of that are enormous. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I just wanted to plant that seed in the hopes that it grows on you. The kitchen sink analogy of heart disease. So this is something that Luke had shared with me. And it's the idea that if we look at this sink, we've got the drain, we've got the flow of water. What we can liken the rate of the water flow to is oxidative stress. The greater the rate, the more oxidative stress, the more buildup of water. The sink drain represents your antioxidant status, right? The bigger the drain, the more oxidative stress that you are going to be able to contend with without dealing with excess buildup of water, which can be likened to atherosclerosis. This is an incredibly useful model, and it directly delineates the pragmatic levers that you can pull, that your loved ones can pull, your friends, your family, to not have to endure a buildup of water that leads to a consequential overflow. This is the experiment that you never gave your consent. And what this represents is the systematic substitution of a diet to which, at one point in time, 99% of added fats were of animal-derived nature and 0 were from vegetable oils, to a time now where we consume 80 grams of these oils per day. That's 5 tablespoons of oil. And to put that into perspective, this is the amount of the initial ingredient that you would need to actually extract that amount of oil per day. 625 grapes, or 40 cups of brown rice, 98 ears of corn, or 2,800 sunflower seeds. This illustrates the ancestral impossibility of the diet that we are currently consuming. It would have been impossible to actually eat the amount of omega-6 linoleic acid from whole food sources. And the same, by the way, is really true of sugar. So is it the fact that we're consuming too much sugar from fruits? Is it the fact that people are consuming 10 bananas per day? Or is it the fact that we can add 50, 100 grams of sugar to a soft drink that we can consume within 60 seconds? So it's the fact that it would have been ancestrally inconsistent and impossible to consume this amount of linoleic acid, right? The amount of fructose even that people are consuming nowadays. And so we have an incompatibility between the hardware that hasn't changed and the software that we are now running In other words, the diet that we are exposing ourselves to. We have a software that is fundamentally incompatible, and our hardware was never designed to run it. This is just showing the ubiquitous nature of these oils. It's not just the fact that these are found in clear plastic bottles, which makes them susceptible to UV damage, resulting in the leaching of the microplastics in the bottle, but rather the fact that these proliferate in all that you see here. Chips, pastas, cookies. You have to check every single ingredients list of every single ingredients label, because the extraction of these oils is so unbelievably cost effective that they run rampant everywhere. And when you go out to eat at your favorite restaurant, you have to be cognizant of that too, because they use these oils as the de facto oil, just given their cost effective nature. This here just shows the proof in the pudding of the fact that these oils bioaccumulate in the form of linoleic acid in body fat, and that this tracks perfectly with our increased consumption. We have data also suggesting that from this time here in the 50s and 60s, the amount in chimpanzee body fat, as evidenced by adipose tissue biopsies, was 8%. And in 2005, 2010, 20, it didn't shoot up to 20%, but it remained the same because chimpanzees have a species-specific diet that hasn't changed. So what the heck should we cook in? What I've done here is I've just outlined the ones where I draw a fine line, a hard line. I would always avoid anything north of 10% linoleic acid. And personally, I wouldn't even cook in lard or olive oil or palm oil. The only thing that I would personally cook in is the best animal-derived source, which is butter, and the best plant-derived source, which is coconut oil. And I really would strongly advise you to adopt a similar mindset. This is a quote that I really like from Popular Science, which is that what was garbage in 1860 was fertilizer in 1870, cattle feed in 1880, and table food and many things else in 1890. Now have a look at the depth and breadth of the problem that is the number of brands that use cottonseed oil, which, by the way, first manifested as a Procter and Gamble manifestation, namely Crisco, crystallized cottonseed. So we can see Olive Garden, Wendy's, DQ, it's Dairy Queen, Quaker, Planters, BK, Burger King, Arby's. There is no shortage of brands that use not just cottonseed oil, but any of the aforementioned refined, bleached, and deodorized oils, which again are extracted in factories like this that resemble oil refineries. And if you haven't seen how canola oil is made, type that into YouTube and prepare to be disturbed. So here's the solution. Saturated fat. We've got steak and eggs. We've got some butter, beef tallow. Got some coconut oil here, and full fat dairy. We've got milk, maybe some cottage cheese. You're looking at the answer. We need more saturated fat, not less. Because while saturated fat increases LDL cholesterol, who cares? LDL cholesterol is the native form. The homeowner doesn't burn down their own home. What we care about is the number of arsonists. We care about the number of people igniting the match that results in the ultimate fire that burns down the home. The homeowner wouldn't burn down their own home. Native LDL cholesterol would not do that. But if and only if and when it becomes oxidized, can it be rendered injurious to the endothelium? And so the question is, how do we avoid oxidation? And it turns out that the exact strategy that we've employed to reduce LDL, namely the increased consumption of polyunsaturated fats in the form of vegetable oils, is antithetical to the strategy of inoculating ourselves from oxidation. And so actually what we want to do is maximize our saturated to polyunsaturated fat intake ratio. And for what it's worth, I recommend a 9-to-1 or better intake of combined saturated and monounsaturated to polyunsaturated. Monounsaturated fats are great because they're not polyunsaturated fats. They don't have multiple double bonds that are prone to oxidative attack. So increase your saturated and monounsaturated relative to polyunsaturated fat intake. You can't save them all, Jason. So this is really something I'm very passionate about, is just saving the world from seed oils. And this was on a lunch break when I was a consultant pharmacist. It's just next door. And I was just talking to this girl about these oils. And it's something that I'm just very passionate about because, her 2-year-old, for example, doesn't know that the canola oil that's in her cupboard, which by the way, she said she would toss out first thing when she got home. Good for her. This was actually, I think, like 2:00 in the afternoon, and she was just on her way back home. Yeah, nobody told me about these oils. Nobody told Alexa about these oils. Nobody told her 2-year-old about these oils. And just growing up and having to deal with exercise-induced asthma, an esophagus that was so inflamed, it was difficult to swallow food, and even just cognitive impacts as well in terms of my ability to think clearly in a lucid fashion. And frankly, just to understand other people as well and just have a really at ease mind that wasn't being inflamed by the food that I was eating. The ways that this has changed my life is immense and it's unspeakable. I can't put this into words. It makes me really emotional to think about the quality of life that I get to experience now. And that's just something that I want for you too. I want you to be on the other side of this. And I want you to have to deal with the consequences of these oils in a nursing home at the end of your life. I don't want you to spend 50 good years and then drop dead of a heart attack to leave your son behind to live out the rest of his days. That's bullshit. And I'm here to put the health back in humanity. I love you very much. Here are the practical takeaways that I didn't even delve into, but pomegranate juice. We talked about oxidation. This is the number one thing that you can do to inoculate yourself from oxidation. Just always think back to that kitchen sink analogy. You want to have a bigger sink. You want to have a greater augmented antioxidant capacity. And pomegranate juice is the number one way to achieve that. Avoid seed oils and added sugars at all costs. There's another mechanism by which excess fructose contributes to, for example, increased expression of VLDL, that's very low dense lipoprotein. And surprise, surprise, VLDL is very prone to oxidation. It all comes back to oxidation. Viewing it through the lens of oxidation makes a 480p picture look 4K. And then lastly, my friend, consuming more saturated fat, that 9-to-1 saturated and monounsaturated fat ratio to polyunsaturated fat. Pay it forward. It's a very good movie. If you learned anything today, please like, comment, subscribe, share this with somebody that you care about, somebody whose health you want to be enhanced, somebody who deserves to know about this. If I could just teleport anywhere right now, I really just want to be in a classroom, maybe in a high school, and just share my presentation, share my story, share what I've learned with the future of our country, with our kids, with the teachers, parents of these children. People deserve to know about this. You deserve to know about this. You deserve to have optimal health and human experience. I love you very much, my friend. And as always, until next time, find your freedom. Peace.